And they're both on Hondas right there. So we got Ricky on the CR250, and I think Wyndham on the CRF450R. So this would be probably the earliest version, or the first generation CRF450R, because Ricky right there is either on a O2 or O3 CR250,
Right, yeah.
I think. So that would put Wyndham on the O2 or O3 450. And I mean, as we talk, we got the 25 CRF possibly coming out or releasing some more details soon.
Yeah, hopefully soon we see Tim Gajser racing it in the MXGP series. They've had 3 races so far. He's at 3 rounds, I should say. He's won one of the races. They call races motos over there, so that's equivalent to our motos here. So he currently sits second in the points chase too as well. So he's looking quite good aboard the new generation CRF450R.
And they've always kind of led the way in terms of what the new bikes will look like. It seems like the GPs, the Hondas on the MXGP side, tend to have the newer tech and design that our production bikes will soon follow.
When they do their press release and say, hey, these are our riders, these are our bikes, that's typically our first look at the all-new generation bike. They typically do a 4-year cycle run. So this last generation was 21 to 24. So I imagine we see 25 to, what is that? What would that be, 29?
Yeah.
29 or so?
Okay. Man, so it's 2002 is when the bike first came out. So we're almost looking at 25 years of this motorcycle, the CRF model, being out. And that's quite a bit of time.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot has changed, but not a lot has changed.
Yeah. I mean, some big things like carbureted to fuel injected, kickstart to e-start, those things have changed. But when you look at the bones of the bike and really look into it, like you said, not a lot has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I made a couple notes, man. So just to highlight some key points. In 2002 was the first year of it for production-wise. So it was their 4-stroke motor. They called it the Unicam engine. That was their just single cam motor design that Honda came out with. They also did a split oil design. So they had oil just for the motor and oil just for the transmission separated. And you drain it from 2 different parts of the engine. So that was unique to Honda as well. They used the same FCR carburetor that everybody was using at the time. And that's a good one as well. They had Showa 47 millimeter forks. This was the generation 2 of them. Previously, they were on the Gen 1 forks on the CR models. So the CR250 from like 97 to 2001 would be the Gen 1. And these are the twin chamber Showa forks. So the first year, like a twin chamber fork came out.
Sick.
In terms of a production fork at that time. For reference, all the Yamahas were on KYBs, and they were on what's called an open cartridge fork. So a earlier technology to twin chamber.
What would the advantages be to a twin chamber versus the open chamber?
Good question, man. It's a more efficient damper. So what I mean by that is at how well it creates compression and rebound damping. The more efficient it is, the better it's going to work. The reason I say that is the more efficient you make an engine run, typically you get better horsepower out of it. It runs at a better temperature, I mean, not too hot, not too cold. So it's just about improving how well it does certain processes.
Gotcha.
By making it a pressurized and sealed damper, we get much more, I don't want to say responsiveness, but when we push the oil through the valving, it's definitely more accurate and, let's say, effective. Without it being sealed and pressurized, there's a lot more room for like air and gas to get inside of the oil and not make it as effective as it could be for it. So they're definitely leading the way in that. There's a 5-speed transmission, and for reference, in the forks that had 0.47 kg fork springs and a 5.5 kg shock spring. The shock spring rate have never changed on that bike until 2023. They increased the shock spring rate from a 5.5 to a 5.7 kg. And they have altered the linkage and the swing arm numerous times from 2002 all the way up to 2023, but never enough to where it would warrant a different spring rate. Meaning they never altered the linkage or leverage ratio so much that it needed a different spring rate.
Got it. So it was well within the ballpark.
Yeah, they're always doing something and altering it, but never so much that it would require a huge change. Whereas when KTM had the linkage bikes from 2011 to 2015, their stock spring rate was like a 5.4. And then the stock spring rate since 2016 is a 4.5. So it dropped a lot because that's how much they changed their linkage. The leverage ratio changed that drastically, that a much different spring rate was needed for the same weight rider. But to continue on the Honda, man, they really made a lot of refined updates for a while, from '02 to '04. '05 was kind of the new chassis. So the first time they actually took that aluminum frame and they kind of slimmed it down, cut some weight. They refined their Unicam engine, and they also came out with their Generation 3 Showa forks. Those had some bigger base valve pistons inside of them. Just around this time as well, in 2006, is when Yamaha released their KYB SSS forks, which are highly regarded. So probably not coincidental, that's why around the same time as well, Honda, which has a huge stake and interest in Showa, released their Generation 3 Showa twin chamber fork, which was a lot more similar to that KYB fork.
Yeah.
They retained the same spring rates, 0.47s in the front and 5.5 on the shock. Then we come to the 2008 model, which is highly sought after among Honda purists.
Very beloved.
They love it. It's the last year of it being carbureted. They made a few more refinements to the chassis and the motor. So it was really the last year of that '02 first initial design they came out with. This was really 6 years of development and fine tuning. And that was Gen 4 of the Showa forks as well. At that point, they updated what we call the free piston. They updated that design, and they also updated the cartridge rod. They made it a little bit bigger. They went from a 12 mil to a 12.5. That's important because that's how much oil gets pushed through the adjuster. So on top of your fork, you have the compression clicker. The cartridge rod pushes oil through that compression adjuster. So the bigger that rod is, the more oil is going to push through it. It's going to make that adjuster more effective in terms of the adjustments that you do, but also more effective in its damping resistance as well.
Nice.
There's more oil is passing through it. And then '09 is when Honda really got themselves in some hot water.
Oh, yeah.
They did the all-new frame,
Which was hated.
heavily refined new motor. They did EFI, which had you could use a lot of improvement on the mapping.
Yeah.
They went to KYB suspension, which usually is heavily sought after and regarded. But they kept the same fork spring rates, 0.47s, same shock spring rate, 5.5, but KYB componentry. And it was a huge change from their previous model in terms of aesthetic, how the bike looked, how the bike ran, in terms of power delivery, going from carbureted to an EFI and early EFI. And the suspension was quite soft as well. So it seemed like the response and feedback from people was quite negative.
Yeah. What do you think they were chasing after? Because they had a beloved '08, and then the '09 just to do such a drastic change after you have a bike that's already so sought after and so beloved by your diehard Honda fans, to do something drastically different just the following model year is quite odd.
Yeah, good point, man. I never really thought about that. Because had they continued on that path and just maybe took that '08 bike and made that fuel injected instead of carbureted and just kept metering it that way, but maybe they got too excited because it's such a departure. Like, all that came from effort and time and development. So like they sat there thinking, this is the better way to go.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see they took such a chance. Granted, it didn't work out. Like, it was not a well-received bike, but it's cool to see Honda, which is often, I think, referred to as a very conservative company, trying something so different.
Yeah.
The bummer was how long it took them to really fix it. Because in 2013 is when they went back to the dual mufflers, and then they went to air forks. So they kept the hated chassis they were on. They added weight to the bike with dual mufflers, and then they put on air forks, which were not very well received at all.
Yeah, it seems like almost another step backwards.
For sure.
Since '08.
Yeah. Yeah, and the air forks was going to make the bike an easier sell for anybody. And then 2015, they took the 2013 and 2014 air forks they had, and those became what KYB considered their KYB kit forks for the air fork option. And in 2015, they came out with a new, they call it the KYB PSF2 fork, so Gen 2. And this was a much simpler, cheaper design of their first air fork. And it worked as what you would expect it to work, being cheaper and simpler. Performed very underperforming. And then on the rear shock, they got rid of the rebound adjuster on the bottom of the clevis, where you typically find the rebound adjuster. And they gave us what we call their triple adjuster up top on the shock. So you see that compression clicker, that has 3 clickers on it. That's high speed and low speed compression like usual. And then it has an additional rebound adjuster. But they got rid of the one at the bottom. And we all quickly learned that the rebound adjuster up there was not effective at all in adding rebound resistance, making it slower, or removing any. So it was a bummer to see them go to worse air forks and then a even lessing performing and tunable rear shock. And now this is 2016, so they are 7 years into this and seemingly not making any improvements.
They dig themselves a deep hole, and it now seems like, as we're getting further and further away from those bad years from that '09 is what we're really talking about. The Honda CRF450R gets better and better not only each year, but each generation cycle. It seems to get more well received, more hyped up as a lot of anticipation to the new bike. Did they fix and improve upon the things that they needed to do did they do their homework? And every time Honda drops a bike, man, it seems like it's Christmas Day because everyone is just chomping at the bit to get as much info and as much photos as they can of this new bike.
Yeah, you're spot on, man, because when they came out in 2017 with the new chassis and new model, the frame looked much more similar to the 2008 frame. They went back to spring forks. They went back to Showa suspension. Granted, it was the newest Showa 49 millimeter spring fork that they had, which was very similar to this Showa A-Kit 49 millimeter fork. So really cool to see them take that and put that on there. And as you could tell, man, the bike was really well received. It still had dual mufflers on it, so that wasn't really cool, but they got rid of the steering damper because I don't think they really needed it anymore. And they really kind of brought back that 2008 kind of Honda feel, but with the refinement of fuel injection, years of learning fuel injection, the better Showa suspension that they put on there. Not the KYB wasn't bad, it was just the settings that Honda was setting it up to. Is what was really bad. It wasn't the hardware that they were buying. That's just strictly the settings.
Yeah.
For some reason, the Showa settings were quite a bit better stock than KYB, and that's saying a lot because even the Showa stock settings weren't that good. So that tells you, man, if these are better than the KYB ones, then those were pretty lacking.
Real quick, so that 2017 model, that all new generation model for 2017, which ended in 2020, that came with Showa forks for that first year?
It did.
Interesting, because on the factory side of things, between Cole Seeley and Ken Roxon, who they grabbed for the 2017 year, they both ran KYB.
They did, didn't they?
Yes.
Yeah, which is interesting because I could swear there was times on the Honda team before that, during that 2009 to 16 era, that they'd often run Showa suspension on it. And that was when the bike was coming with KYB stuff.
Yeah. We just get a hard on for just seeing all these guys try different suspension companies. Apparently.
Right? And it's interesting when Honda owns or has a big interest in Showa, whereas Yamaha has a big ownership and interest in KYB. And as far as I know, I've never seen a Yamaha come with anything but KYB suspension, at least on a dirt bike. I think a few Yamahas have maybe had Ohlins, but never Showa.
Yeah, like some of their street motorcycles, like the MT10 SP, it's like a special edition MT10 that has Olin suspension on it.
Does it really?
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad you told me that.
Yeah. But yeah, it'd be so trippy. Could you imagine seeing a YZ450F with let's just go off the wall here, WP suspension on it?
Right?
Like, dude, that would just be the trippiest thing ever. Like, if you go online, I'm sure some of you diehard motocross fans have maybe seen this. I don't know if it's a team or a group or maybe even an organization or just WP Europe. They put WP suspension on KX models. Like, you see them on a KX 250, you see them on a 450, and there's teams, I believe, that go and race those models with WP suspension on it.
Yeah, I think there's a GP team that's been doing it, or at least a team in Canada. I know for sure that has been. I thought WP was going to make a big push to offer their kit stuff for more than just the KTM group. And I don't know if it didn't get as well received as they had planned or if it kind of ran out of steam for it.
Yeah.
But 2019 was another year that they really updated the frame again. they just kind of continued their process of just refinement. And I think it's really started to pay off because we've seen a lot more Hondas at the track, 250s and 450s.
Yeah.
As the 250 followed suit with the upgrades as well. They were always about a year behind, and the 250 getting all the updates. But they continue to update the suspension every 2 years with the new generation show-off fork. For 2019 was a new generation for it, and then 2021 was another generation of updates. I have videos elsewhere on the channel, so we won't go too much into those updates, but you can check those out for exact details. So I've been considering they've been out for more than 20 years. They haven't really cut a ton of weight. Over the years, they've cut some weight, maybe put some weight back on in terms of whether they go from air forks back to spring forks. This is different chassis that they've done in terms of slimming down the frame, which maybe they've gone too far on slimming the frame down because, as you pointed out, they've added some bracing to at least some of the pro riders' frames up in the headstay, up in that area. And that could be a real possibility because we've never seen a production frame add material. So at least specific to this one, the Honda production frame has continued to get slimmer and lower profile over time. So maybe they've gone too far in that direction.
Yeah, and that's something that I think maybe not enough of us talk about because we all talk about the Honda being rigid, unpredictable, maybe even sketchy at times, depending on what area of the track that you're riding on. Maybe the frame is too soft. Now, I'm just taking this from a logical approach. The guys at Honda and all sorts of chassis engineers are way smarter than I will ever be and more knowledgeable than I will probably ever be on designing and how a motorcycle works. But just looking at it from a logical perspective, if they're bracing the frame, you're adding material to the frame, of course, making it more rigid and more stiff. We're all sitting here talking about the Honda being so rigid and so stiff. Now, I personally don't have a whole lot of time on the new Gen 21 to 24 Gen bike, but everything, all the reviews that I've read, videos I've watched say those things. So if the pro guys are adding materials to the frame, in my opinion, it sounds like maybe the chassis is flexing too much. Maybe the chassis is too soft. So that's why they're adding materials to the frame. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Chase Sexton was having so many crashes. Like you had talked about this on Ryan Ritter's podcast with oscillation. When you look at a doorstop, when you flick it, it goes back and forth. It doesn't just whack into the middle and stop.
Yes.
The chassis, similar sort of thing. When that chassis flexes, it's going to snap back, kind of like that rubber band example that you had. I wonder if the Honda frame was doing that, so they added the braces, and maybe even the braces weren't even enough. They have to even maybe add more material. Now, obviously, we do have homologation in the US. We cannot take away material from the frame, but we can add material to the frame. So that's why they are able to run those custom chassis, if you will.
Good point. Yeah, good point, because in that specific area, I think they were mostly doing it on their supercross bikes. I don't know if they did it on their...
They were running that in outdoors as well.
Oh, they were?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking Supercross would really make sense because the suspension's so much stiffer that as the suspension resists being compressed, it's going to put more stress into the rest of the bike.
Absolutely.
But if they're doing a motocross, granted these are pro riders, so the input and levels of forces they're putting on the bike is a fair bit higher than our normal weekend warrior and even your local pro rider that is still very talented. The guys at this level, they're a special breed of rider, and the 100%. Stuff they're doing on a bike is something else.
100%.
But okay, interesting. Yeah, man, that could totally be something added to it, for sure. It'd be interesting to see what they do with the 25 model. It seems like where they're mounting the subframe, they have some extra material now.
Yeah, so the 21 to 24 only has 2 contact points from the actual chassis itself to the subframe. This new Gen bike shows 3 contact points between those 2 parts of the motorcycle. So I wonder, granted, that's not like a huge change, when you're adding maybe, I don't know how long that other attachment is, but maybe, this much more material, especially in the center of the frame. I wonder how much of a drastic difference that is, maybe towards like the rear of the bike. But a lot of the 25 CRF450R looks pretty similar to the current one that you could just go buy on the showroom floor right now. When you look at the motor package, the engine looks fairly the same. Granted, we can't see inside and we don't have a production bike to actually look at. We're just looking at Tim Gajser's bike here. So, just from the outside looking in, it looks fairly the same. Even the chassis itself, outside of those contact points to the subframe, looks fairly similar as well. They're running what seems to be stock engine hangers, but they are running maybe some different hardware, if you will,
Okay.
stock axle blocks. So it looks to be another revision, if you will, not a whole another new generation. We're changing everything. When we were looking at Tim Gajser's bike for this year,
Mm-hmm.
he is no longer running that BFRC shock, which is kind of noteworthy just because
Yeah.
the Honda team over there in Europe has been running the BFRC for quite a while now.
They
It's
have.
not been like a 1 or 2 year project and they've ditched it. They've been running it for, I want to say, close to 10 years now, maybe even more.
Oh, crap. It's been that long, huh?
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
quite a while. So
Okay.
yeah, seeing Tim not on that shock now is, you know, quite noteworthy. And
Mm-hmm.
also the Lawrences are not running that. They're running the traditional style shock here in the US as well. So
They are, aren't they?
it's cool to see Tim following suit with the Lawrences, because typically it's the other way around. Like, I believe they got the frame bracing from Honda Europe and
Mm-hmm.
those guys as well, and they brought that over here. So it's cool to see them trading knowledge and whatnot.
I'm excited to see where Honda goes with this new 25 model. I hope they have a few more just bigger updates. Maybe not anything as crazy as the '09. Like, let's not push for that far. But I hope
Yeah.
they take a little, I don't want to say chances, but just make a few more extreme changes to the bike and really like go for it.
Yeah, and we're just speculating here. You know, this is a works bike, obviously, a bike that
Mm-hmm.
races in a series where there is no homologation, so they can kind of do whatever they want. Again, we're not looking at we don't have any insider information on necessarily what this bike is going to look like once it hits the production line. So a lot of this is just speculative and what we see just by seeing some spy photos on the internet. I guess not spy photos because they're all released if you just look them up now. But yeah, you can look it up yourself if you want. Just type it in 2025 CRF450R and it'll pop right up there.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. Check it out. It's fun to see just what they're up to over on the MXGPs. For what was I going to touch on before we finish up? Oh, I meant to touch on spring rates real quick. So in 2017, they went to a 0.51 for the stock fork springs.
Hmm.
Before then, they're always at a 0.47. So they went up quite a bit at 2 spring rates. Usually we change spring rates in gaps of 2 for it. So that's why I say that's 2 spring rates. That's quite a big change. And the bike didn't really get any heavier, anything like that.
Hmm.
So there's definitely been a change in how bikes are being set up from the factory, and definitely a change in how we valve and set up bikes suspension wise
Yeah.
as well. I think they're learning now maybe usually things such as too much flex or too soft of suspension as well.
Yeah.
Too soft that it can rob your forward momentum as you ride. You get a lot of chassis movement out of the bike because how much is moving as you go over the bumps. But I think they're also still learning that there is some degree of flex that we do want in the bike, and they're figuring out the certain areas where to add that and where to reduce it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just the landscape of Moto now, as far as suspension goes, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like a lot of people are now preferring, maybe not the general population, but at least the pro riders are running setup that's quite stiff, faster on the rebound, where we're kind of getting away from the era of like it being dead
Old and
feeling.
slow.
Yeah, old and slow.
Yeah, and referring to rebound, not the rider.
Yeah,
Sorry,
good
sorry,
point.
low and slow. That's what I meant. Low and slow. Yeah, I often hear that they want the rear to be low and slow, and I understand their logic on it from that perspective. But man, the faster you get going, the quicker your rebound needs to be to follow the ground
Exactly.
because it's going to cover the same series of bumps a lot quicker. So if you want your wheel to contact the ground at all and give you any sense of traction, because that's what traction is, it's when your wheel is actually following the ground.
Yep.
The rebound has to at least follow the ground at a certain speed. Anything slower than that, you are really going to be minimizing the feel of traction that you have. Rarely do riders get bucked over the bike because the rebound's too quick. Usually it's because they hit a bump and they did not have the proper riding technique set up for it, or they weren't expecting it. And it caused the bike to either bottom out and kick them over the bars, or they hit a bump and the shock didn't compress at all because they weren't ready for it, and that pushed them over the bars. But rarely is it related to the rebound just being too quick.
Hmm.
Usually it's a combination of mostly rider error for it,
Interesting.
because you see in Supercross, they're on such stiff bikes. As the track breaks down, they're still jumping the triples and the doubles all night long, even if those faces get all rutted up and kickered up as well. But they have to use so much body English to jump the bike and keep it jumping relatively level.
Got
and
it.
flat. You see, as dudes get tired, they start to make more mistakes, where the bike gets kicked sideways or jump front end high or front end low, because as they lose strength, they have less body English or movement over the bike to control it.
Yeah.
And with stiff suspension, it gets even harder to do. But yeah, for the Honda, one thing that would be really cool they do if they made a 350. They're probably
Yeah.
not going to do it, but I think that would be another big sell. Just jump on that
We're,
point again.
we're still tuning on that horn. Like until another OEM makes a
Yeah.
350, we're not gonna stop
That
singing
would be a pretty
about
sick
it.
one too,
Dude,
though.
oh my gosh. Oh, I feel like any brand. Like I'd be so pumped if we woke up tomorrow and we just had a press release on an Instagram saying like, yeah, like the new 2025 Suzuki RMZ 350 is here. I'd be
Yeah.
like, yes, like dude, this is so cool. But yeah, more 350s in the world, please and thank you.
Hmm. For any facts or interesting things you left out about the Honda history, leave them in the comments. And the highest liked comment, we will send you guys a free JBI hats like Anthony has
Ooh,
on.
yeah,
So it's not up to us; it's up to everybody else that likes the comment. So everyone has the most. So anything interesting, or is a cool little fact or tip you guys have on the history of the CRF line that we might have left out, or just something cool to share?
I like it.
Let us know.
Yeah, get more people in some JBI merch.
Yes, that too.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for watching Shop Talk. I believe this is what episode 4 now. Flying through them.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
it's been fun.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
got plenty more to come, and any ideas too, shoot them in the comments, guys.
Yep.
We've got some more ideas for future videos as well, and we'll keep releasing those out.
Cool. Take care, you guys.